Welcome to my book haul on wrestling and wrestlers. Right now you might be thinking, he needs to fire his wardrobe department. Well, I'm wearing this piece of art because I wanted to go with the theme. And if a wrestler went through my wardrobe to wear something to the ring, I felt this would probably be it. I don't even wear this to the garden anymore. But I knew there was a good reason I held on to this shirt and 5 or 6 others just like it. Now, this is a short one today. We're just talking about a few books that I think might be the most famed amongst wrestling and wrestlers, but you can be the judge of that. Before we get started though, please give me a little love. And if you're new to the channel, do the thing. You might even like me. Probably not, but it's a possibility. First up is Ringmaster, Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America, published in 2023, written by Abraham Josephine Reisman, who also wrote True Believer, The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee, published in 2021. At the time of the release of this video, there's a documentary coming out soon on Netflix called Mr. McMahon, which is basically sort of this book, plus his resignation, which happened not long after this was published. I'm about halfway through reading this right now, and it's fascinating. Now, between the ages of about 8 and 12, I was a rabid WWF, pre-WWE, fan. I had a decent collection of those 7-inch hard rubber wrestlers, which me and a couple of my childhood friends used to play with in a toy boxing ring, or we would just whip them at each other. And they'd always leave a mark. I've never been hit so hard by a flying object and laughed at the same time. If you were a kid of the 70s and 80s, by the way, you probably had the occasional concussion you never let your parents know about, or your parents knew about it but just didn't want to take the time to take you to the hospital. Because in those days, you sipped your dad's beer and you dusted yourself off. Now, I used to go to quite a bit of wrestling matches in the early 80s. Once they started televising more and more matches, my friends got into it too. Then the toys came along, etc., etc. The climax of my fandom came when I went to the then called Skydome, where the Toronto Blue Jays play, for WrestleMania 6, April 1st, 1990. Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior for the Heavyweight Championship and the first WrestleMania that was held outside the US. After that, I moved to the US/Massachusetts from Canada, started my teenage years, and it became a little uncool at that time and place to watch wrestling. But I had still loosely, quietly followed it. Those were still the early days of The Undertaker, I believe. I had a good idea it was fake a few years earlier, but I had no idea Vince McMahon was anything more than a ringside color analyst. Never mind the owner that steered the ship. All this to say, even though I rarely pay attention to wrestling now, besides going down the occasional rabbit holes of my childhood on YouTube, I couldn't get this book in my hands fast enough. It's dripping with pop culture nostalgia. Also, if you're interested in hearing the author talk about the book, you can find a good interview with him on the Pultrocast with Darren Pultrowitz. This, in short, is a behind-the-scenes story, and I will definitely be giving this book its own review at some point soon. And the last word as it stands, McMahon resigned from TKO, which owns WWE and UFC, in January 2024 after allegations of sex trafficking and sexual assault. McMahon is currently under a federal probe, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the Netflix documentary. Second up is Hitman, My Real Life in the Cartoon World of Wrestling. There's a callback here. Wait for it. Published in 2007, written by Bret the Hitman Hart. Hitman was always one of my favorite wrestlers growing up. When I began watching, he was on a tag team with his brother-in-law, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. He was sleek, stylish, quite technical in the ring, and at the beginning, a heel, but I didn't care. Their finishing move was this elevated clothesline. Maybe they called it the heart attack. Fitting, but he was never great on the mic per se. What I mean by that is, promos before the matches and stuff. So I had seen this hardcover around the used book market. I'm mostly a paperback guy just because of the size of these things. And I wasn't convinced on buying this until I went down a Hitman YouTube rabbit hole and saw that he had a lot of great stories to tell. He just wasn't a great mudslinger in his active years, is all. He was, here comes the callback, a great cartoonist, by the way. There's also a number of quotes from him in Ringmaster, which is just ramping up my appetite to read this as well. Number 3, and the last book on my list here, The Eighth Wonder of the World, The True Story of Andre the Giant. Published in 2020, written by Bertrand Ibert and Pat Lepard. What do you do if you're 7'4", 550 pounds, and want to use the toilet on an airplane? What do you do if you want to catch a cab in Tokyo but no one will stop? How does dating work? I don't think there's anyone over 40 who isn't at least somewhat familiar with this man's life inside the ring. But what about all that other stuff? I mean, it's not like he can just put a hat and sunglasses on and just go unnoticed, like Ryan Reynolds or something. I mean, wouldn't you be grumpy if people kept looking at you funny? It'd be like you were surrounded by paparazzi 24/7. I watched this legend of a man, not just in the ring, but also in one of my most favorite movies of all time, The Princess Bride, which I saw as a kid, obviously, and still love. How often can you say that about a movie you saw as a child? Shout out to Goonies. There's an HBO documentary about this man called Andre the Giant. Surprise! Which I'm sad to say I haven't seen yet. It's like the only specialized channel I don't have because I'm poor. This is in my top 10 books that I own that I haven't read yet, and it should be in your top 10 books that you own that you haven't read yet too. That's it, that's all. I wouldn't call myself a wrestling enthusiast anymore, but these books, people, definitely got my attention, and I think they'd be worth yours too. Let me know which of these books interest you most, or if you've happened to have read them already, what did you think? Please share your thoughts below. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and if you'd like to support me any further, you can do that through my crowdfunding page called BuyMeACoffee. You'll see a link down below. Thanks again for watching, and please remember to be excellent to each other.